I think that change lies within each one of us. Creativity has already begun because nature is now working through you. This business of continually being in activity is all wrong. It's a non-building because I wanted to dissolve the concept of buildings as we know them. Each frame I tend to study as a canvas. I don't tend to overuse concrete. It's wonderful being in this setting with so many young people. When I was asked to come in and speak, so before I go any further, I'm not here as a teacher, as a philosopher. I'm not come here to give you a doctrine or a theory or a dogma. We've actually come to discuss within the first, let's say, 10, 15 minutes, an extremely grave subject that confronts our planet. The word transformation was used many times in the subject given to me. It's a long subject matter, but transformation. For me, transformation means change. So first question, and I was talking to some of the young friends here that I was very fortunate and blessed to attend some of the lectures of J. Krishnamurti. And I think you've probably heard of the gentleman. Some of you may have read him. But to be in his presence is a completely different level of experience. And he said at the outset, so if I am following a little bit in his footsteps, it's not because I'm seeking comparison, because to follow in the footsteps of such a stalwart, I think is an honor. So I always say that we say we want to bring about change. Let's come to buildings and carbon footprints and so on a little bit later. Let's come to fundamentals. Why do we need change? So if we can answer that question, then we can move on to maybe try, and discover more about this subject. So first let's come to facts. Do we have any difference of opinion in where our planet stands today? You will find many pointers: ice caps melting, holes in the ozone layer, temperamental climate, soaring temperatures, erosion of our environment. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect, which I think concerns us, in fact all humans, but particularly so those who are entrusted with this aspect of creating a habitat, is that what is the state of the people themselves? Is our planet not torn by strife? Look at every corner of it. I don't want to get into A place or B place or C place. Right. There is unrest. 50% of the people overeat and 50% are hungry. I'm simply giving you facts because we can have many subjective overviews on things. But facts cannot be questioned. And I'm a person who likes to proceed with logic and with fact. So, we have this condition on one hand, a dying planet. Who's responsible? All of us. I think it's man who's responsible. We are exploring space, wonderful. But one of the ideas which I think is preposterous is that let's start to seek another planet where we can go and dwell in the future if this planet doesn't survive. Can you imagine sitting in this wonderful little place? What a planet, what an opportunity has been given to us. And our flight is somewhere else. Why can't we look after our backyard, our own backyard, our own house? So, let's say that collectively we do agree that there is serious concern, fact. This planet needs radical action, otherwise it's going where it is going, fact. If we agree on this, then let's move on and saying this word transformation was used. To me, those 5 or 6 sentences boil down to one word: change. Change is required. Now let's come and go further. How will this change come about? We've tried all forms of government. I'm not referring to a personality, I'm referring to forms of government. Democracy, communism, dictatorship. Nothing has succeeded. We've turned to religion. And we met the same fate. Go back into history and you'll find has become one of the biggest divisive forces. So, where will this change come from? As I said, we have to learn to walk together. So, and what needs to change? So if I cannot be responsible for the actions of a government or of A, B, and C, and all the external forces and powers to be, right, how can I bring about change? So I think that change lies within each one of us. We have to change. Each one of us is actually the change. Now you will say, okay, agreed, and I want to change. And I'll ask you another question. I'm sorry, you'll find maybe there are more questions coming from me than answers, but well, that's the way it is. I'll ask you a question. What are you trying to change? Do you know what or who you are trying to change? Because you want to change, but unless you know the object, you know what you want to change, then only can change be effected. So I could spend a whole day on this particular subject, but let's start to understand. And I particularly am very interested in talking to the younger minds, particularly to students, because this is of great relevance to them. We have all, our senior generation has brought us to this point. We are responsible for it. Now, somebody has to take up or stand for this cause, start understanding what needs to be done at the grassroots level, at each person's level. So what I have done is to first understand who is this subject we are addressing. What are the components of this subject so we can tackle them, right? So I think I can start with, yeah. Now, I've kind of, I do my own little thing and I said, okay, let's simplify this and break it up into the 4 I's, okay? Yeah. So first one, intellect. It's very important, please carefully listen to this. The slides that follow and pictures of projects are not half as important. Intellect means all that you have collected from the time you were a child, what you got from the parents, what you got from school, what you got from university, what you got from media. All of what you have collected is what you are. It is simply an accumulation. And if you were to go deep down, you found that none of that belongs to you. It's all borrowed because it's been given by somebody and you have collected it. That is intellect. Okay? Instinct. Something we are born with. And something we have chosen to add a prefix to, which is animal. We call it, moment you say instinct, somebody says animal. That's what instinct is. It belongs to animals. It's something we are born with. It's something which is an intrinsic part of our nature. And part of the reason why we are, how we are, and what we are is because of not understanding the word instinct and allowing society to repress everything, and which is why we find 90% of our social, psychological problems emerge. I will not go deeper into it, but many studies exist which can prove this point. Next. You come to intelligence. Here is where the first positive step starts to take place. I'm sure all of you are aware that each one of our bodies is composed of approximately 8 billion cells. And each one of these cells carries with it its own intelligence. Science can ratify it. Definitely. So, you're actually carrying an intelligent cosmos within yourself, 8 billion cells. This is the potential. So, many thousand years ago, our ancestors did a little study on this, that what if this entire potential was mobilized? We've seen the power of the atom. I'm sure all of you saw Oppenheimer when it came through in here. I don't know if you got a chance to see Oppenheimer and the father of the nuclear bomb and so on. But the power of one atom. You can imagine how much is contained potential within ourselves, within the seed that we are. Unfortunately, it never gets to manifest, it never gets to sprout, and certainly doesn't get to flower. The next. Intuition. Here is where creativity starts. It is a possibility of creativity. I think she jumped. But anyway, intuition means that you can now take that leap and saying, there is something coming from within me which is not borrowed. It's very interesting. I'm leaving you actually with these thoughts. It's not something that you have to collect, but I think it's basically something you should delve into because it concerns the life of each one of you. Our journey is completely separate, all of us, and it's unique. All of us are unique. As I said, fingerprints not the same, corneas not the same, the way we function not the same. We are unique. So why should I want to be like somebody else? I may say that, yeah, that person is a great artist, but I don't want to be like that. I am what I am, and I will stay with that, and I will nurture what has been given to me. So, the summary of what I said in the 4 I's is very simple. Creativity can only have an origin when you become silent. And silence is not the absence of noise. It's not the noise of the fan here. No. It's the inner noise. So for me, at a very early age, I was blessed. I'm fortunate. I was in the company of sages. So it came as a matter of fact. So you say you want to know nature. Okay? I want to communicate with nature. Fine. But what is the language of nature? The language of nature is silence. Then the communication becomes a communion. You become one. Creativity has already begun because nature is now working through you. You have now become a catalyst. Please try and understand where I am coming from. The doer has gone. Doer is the immense force of nature. You can imagine how immense it is. And it's flowing through you. You become the catalyst. You're receiving signals now. And you are moving aside and stopping thumping your chest that I do this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. You're simply allowing things to happen. So, we move from here to, I'm sure you want a little bit of brass tacks, right? You're all young people. And I know the concentration levels, I'm sorry, I'm not being negative about it, but it's a very interesting little subject. In one of Osho's talks in Pune, so all of you wearing watches, just focus on the seconds hand of your watch for 1 minute. That's all. This mind cannot stay there for more than 15-20 seconds. It's already moved. That is the level of our concentration. So, this is not, it should not bother you, but at least it's making you aware bit by bit as to who you are. 30 seconds, no concentration. Man, what are you talking about? What's happening to you? What's going on inside? I was blessed. I still don't press a button. You see, there's a lady who's a trainee in my office, young lady from Ahmedabad, and she's doing all this. I never press buttons. I only use a charcoal and a soft pencil. That's my life. I know I am criticized for it sometimes, that you should at least learn WhatsApp, etc. I said, I don't want to get there. What for? Somebody wants to speak to me, I will speak. But this business of continually being in activity is all wrong. Action, yes. Activity, no. Activity is coming on its own. It's spinning around on its own. Action, when called, you will act and then you withdraw back. Stop. They're two different things. Their quality is totally different. So, Just the one before this. So what we did is, if you see the right diagram, this has literally just become the symbol of MA. You see, I have put tranquility, silence in the environment right in the middle. And then start to look at all the other aspects that you need to address whilst not forgetting what is it that you are wanting to do. So that comes in the middle. And then you can look at climatic factors, you can look at regional influences, you can look at local materiality, you can look at many, many things which are very vital before you draw the first line. In my case, the way I have been, I hesitate a lot before I put pencil to paper. I can go through a site, stand on top of the hill, see the lake, see a fort, see how tall the trees are growing, what are the angles that we go, what are the wind angles, where the sun is rising. No design. You now wait for a response from somewhere. When all this is coming together, it'll come to you. Why the rush? And that's another thing. We are in too much of a hurry. And here the West tells you the faster you run, the harder you run, you will reach. 6,000 years ago, our sages said, you will never reach by going this way. If you want to reach, stop. Stop. Pause. Then you would have reached. The other one is endless. Not possible. Nobody has, nobody will. Very important. They're not so little things, but they're very important things. Right. Let's move on. Yeah. So, I take you back around 4 decades. I'm sorry, every time you will find me speaking, you'll say, oh God, this guy is a fossil man. I've been practicing architecture for close to 50 years. Okay. So, this was a house I did, one of the very first projects. Relatively a young fellow. It's of course subjective. And you know what the struggle is for an architect who's beginning. I'm sure everybody does. This was a house for the Times of India group in Delhi, and they wanted a winter house. How they stumbled upon me, I'm still trying to figure out, but somewhere, you know, there are memory lapses, so I can't figure out. But here, I was given an opportunity by this family. So, we actually got an opportunity to start to enunciate some of the principles that were building up within. The building up, for example, we have a context of history. If you see Delhi, 3,500 years ago was called Indraprastha. That's history. The axial planning, right up to Lutyens' times, Old Delhi and so on, was one of the influences. The axis was generated from the entrance to a well, which is a source of life. And the house began to generate almost like a matrix, organic, capable of growth for a family. You know, Indian joint families grow. What we do is we immediately draw a rectangle, a box, and then we start working within it. What if there is no box? Because a box itself is confining. Anything with boundaries is confining. Nature wants to be free. So, we built multiple axes, one towards the sleeping area, one towards where he wanted his little office when people would come to see him in winters, one space where he wanted to have tea in the evenings, and he says, I want the fragrance of flowers in winter, so I call it the house of the senses, where it was only roses there, etc. So you are actually trying to build a huge matrix, layer upon layer upon layer, of functional requirements being interpreted by you, superimposing local materials, local influences, the way the sun was moving, the way there was natural light, the way there was ventilation, etc., etc., and sustainability. This house had the well, we were growing our own food, he had his own little cattle shed there, and it was the very first example of actually almost a zero carbon footprint. So early in the day, I was blessed. And you can see how the planning is. There is a single access which is going through there, straight up. And then you can see a secondary access developing. And then a third one which comes into the studio and guest thing. And it's evolved around courtyards, like the old katras of Chandni Chowk. And the old houses. Of course, courtyards are there in all of India. So it's nothing new. But the courtyards, smaller ones, the larger ones, right? The articulation of space, the play, the hide and seek of light and shade, of texture, very simple things. And yet you will find that there is no need for complexity of form or forcing yourself upon the subject. Now this is very important because I'm finding more and more that as people are trying harder and harder to say that, you see, I'm different, right? Difference can come in many ways. It can come in utmost simplicity. It can come ultimately through the comments of a person who uses the space and who has something nice to say about it. That some of the things I could not understand when you were explaining to them, me in your hi-fi architectural language, but now I do, when I live in it. Yeah. Just a second. And you'll find that from this time and since then, the tree has become very important to me. I carry a little bit of that elixir of the mountains of nature. And for me, and you'll see in some of the subsequent projects, my own house, I think it is there in one of these, is where I was there 2 weeks back and I wandered through the entire property. And then I came back, I picked out my sketchbook and I wrote one page on how that house is vanishing slowly into the forest. It's almost as if the forest was deprived of that little space and it's reclaiming it. And I think that should put paid to all the issues. I want to stand out. I want these things to, there's a statement I need to make. I think this sublimation of being with nature. Yeah. You can see. And simple trabeate detailing. You simply have walls and you've got masses sitting on them. The oldest architecture possible. You just put this and put something over it. Trabeate detailing. Fundamental. And you can see, just go back, down the end, how even little cuts there. And you see another tree growing there. It's almost as if you have mapped the trees and you're actually planning the house around the darn trees, and not really concerned about what is the form of the house. Yeah. Now here, you can see the fact that this tree, and I remember this vividly, the roots were so close to where was the last point I could put that wall for my guest block. So we built eccentric foundations. Very simple acts. They are not great acts. Go on. Okay. Let's shift gear a little bit. Always there's a constraint of time, but so we can move on. Now, I selected a spectrum of works because we can move from here, to there, to there, to there. I'm never afraid of taking up a challenge. I was asked, I think about 4 or 5 years back by a developer, why are you so scared of working with developers? I said, I have nothing against developers. You carry on with your life. I'm going ahead with my life. Where is the need? Maybe, we can meet in the evening once and have a drink together, but I think that's it. No? There is no need. No? Why should I make your life miserable, or vice versa? Okay. So, but anyway, he pushed me, and I said, okay, I will take up the challenge on one condition. If I can bring something meaningful to the table, then only. Otherwise, whatever effort I've done, you can write it off and you carry on with what you're doing. So we'll come to, I think that's some of it is just completed, not been shot yet, but maybe I'll run into it. So here, just go back. Yeah. Here was a different kind of challenge. This was Lupin 3 decades ago. Famous pharma company, they wanted to build a research center. I'm a peculiar kind of guy. I take these words and then I dive deep into them. What is research? So I met a lot of the researchers in their old research center, talked to the scientists, tried to discover who they were, what they were trying to do, what was their environment, etc., etc., etc. And from that, I drew my own conclusions. And I said to myself, they're in the last of the 4 eyes, the intuitive level, where he wants to discover new molecules. And therefore, the quality of the microscope is not the determining factor. It's something else. Let's give him an environment. I realized that these scientists were so closed doors. They were literally sitting like this. They wouldn't share anything with the neighbor. So, in a way, I said, I must find a way how these people's paths crisscross. They must talk to each other. And if the fellow suddenly gets an idea, he could be sitting his feet in a water in the kund that we've done, and a stone and a tablet has been given to him where he can draw freehand on that if he gets an idea. Why are ideas only generated in a laboratory, inside the laboratory? Why not here? I think you get great ideas sitting here. So, we questioned all of that. And then, of course, I won't repeat the other parts, which is understanding the sun, the local materials, etc., 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 because then it'll become tedious and we certainly won't have time. You assume that the same rigorous approach is employed with each and every project. The young lady sitting here would probably testify to it. It maybe gets a little bit too much, but then they know it now. That before you have that one page on all that, there's no point in starting to discuss design and moving forward as to how it will look and so on and so forth. We don't care about it. What it's going to look like is what it will look like. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll look like something. I don't know. So we kind of work very differently. We are not obsessed with the superficial, with the looks. Unfortunately, this is becoming the trend. Your generation is open to there. The moment I see some talk about, like we are doing a center for celluloid preservation and a museum. Tuck. They are going into, I don't know what, Pinterest, I don't know what all they've got, and they've seen 100 museums here. Without even understanding what this subject is. What is it all about? So, go on. Now, it's in summer, like Gujarat, Pune. This is on the outskirts of Pune, very close to Khadakwasla, where the ND is. It's almost in non-architecture, it's like an outpouring of earth from the hill, which has become the wall. That's all. Literally, earth poured out, just became the wall. And that's all you see of this very large research park. Nothing. It communicates nothing to you. It's simply a series of fenestrations in a wall. It's a non-building because I wanted to dissolve the concept of buildings as we know them. Yeah. Now, the site plan on the left, yeah, on the left is the main center. Up there on the right is the drive-through, which is where we created a huge reservoir. You pass through that, harvesting water, the engineering. And then this part was the first foray into understanding of the mandala, the cosmic mandala. I will not go into details, but that is where it was. It was a square. The center had all the common facilities and the labs were ringed around, and the head of it was the admin and so on, which is the block up there on the left. Yeah. Now, just run you by some images. So, just go back. Yeah. Again, you are also sitting in a similar place. Okay. Encourage people, particularly in the evenings and in winters, to sit there and be able to discuss things, exchange ideas, right? Interact with each other. Yeah. Now, if you see on the left there, there's a timeless manner in which water was carried. It was called an aqueduct. So these kind of timeless, I would say, markers have been introduced into the project. You look at a little further down and you see how the cut in the building and the steps that are exposed through. So the idea of, at some stage from the macro, when you start getting to the detail, now the artist starts to paint on the canvas. He knows each color. He's taking his time painting now. He's not going to produce 100 paintings in a month. He's just working slowly. And so each frame I tend to study as a canvas. Many, many years back as a young man, I was posted to do some work in Calcutta for 2 years, and I saw the great Satyajit Ray shoot. He was alive then and shooting. I had once thought that I would be a filmmaker. It fascinated me, the whole idea of light and of life. But it was, I still remember, it was Utpal Dutt and Aparna Sen who were the lead actor and actresses. But there was only one lead in that project, was Satyajit Ray. 5:30 in the morning till 7:15 and pack up. The light had gone. And he had hundreds of sketches of each scene and frame. He was a great sketcher himself. So, this ability, so somewhere you get influenced. And these are the right kind of influences, according to me, by people who are so passionate about their art and craft. Yeah. Now, for example, you look far right, we need an auditorium for 100 people. Now, everywhere there is a language of walls. Somewhere the walls intersplice how they join these junctions with each other. And then this animal came up, a 100-seater cube. So we simply tilted this cube to the angle of the seating inside. So it becomes a piece of sculpture. I also, in my spare time, do sculpture. Yeah. Must be wondering, what all is this guy doing, man? He wants to do films and he sometimes... Is he actually doing anything, right? Meaningful or not? I also have that question, but anyway, that's for another day. Yeah. You can see how very simply each composition is hewn. I don't tend to overuse concrete. Today we are realizing it's the worst material to use worst on the carbon footprint. So for me, right from the beginning, I was not a concrete man. And just because people use concrete and it looked nice and you could shape it and form it, etc., it didn't. I was not very convinced by the whole argument. And that's the way I have lived. We've had to use concrete minimally where we had to use it. Yeah, you will see aspects of that too. Yeah. Yeah. Again, as I said, look at the dialogue with the sun. How the ramps are moving to carry things, and yeah, the central space where people can get together, central dining, gym, library, kund. Yeah. Now you can see here the dining room and the kund on the northeast with the steps there, almost mimicking the ghat. Now this has been a very, very strong influence in my works. This relationship of this life-giving force, the river, and the ghat. Life begins and life ends there. If there is a beginning and if there is an ending. Yeah? Let's say it's cyclical. Yeah, this relationship. Yeah. And engineering. Now this is, I'll take 2 minutes on this. I was first a student of engineering for a year before I went into architecture. And this is something that bothers me to date. Architects need to know more about engineering, and engineers need to know a little bit more about architecture. There is a huge gap, and there is a lacuna, and that is manifest in our architecture of today. Architect designs something, he brings that fellow along, say, will you size this column, do the reinforcement, do this, etc. But that's not how you design. The two have to be working like this. So for me, sometimes to the point of irritation of engineers, I would like to get back into the world of bending moments and compression and tension. I do that constantly. Okay? Yeah. That sculpture you see there was one of my first interventions of, in sculpture. It's actually a small 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot cube, almost as a counterpoint to the large auditorium at the back, which I explained to you a little while before. And you can see the inverted torso of the human being. It's a satire on where we find ourselves today on the planet. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Right. Now, here's a project. I told you I delve into many things. They say jack of all trades and master of none. And I'm often criticized that you don't have a style. We expect that this is your work and suddenly you do something and it's gone there. And I can't, for the love of me, understand what is this word style. Am I talking about fashion? Am I talking about summer, spring, autumn, and fall? What am I talking about? So, here, we were to do a very large campus center for Vedanta, which is one of the very large multinationals. And I had some training in understanding a little bit of healthcare and could bring some of those principles because the epicenter is the human being, is the patient. And if you forget that, that's what we all forget. As I said, no, we make a box, this is a hospital. And we are done. And then we start planning things within it. And then we have those long, dreary corridors with no light and so on and so forth. This was a cancer center. I fortunately had a large plot of land. And therefore, I had the freedom to express certain ideas, right, that were perhaps germinating, and they got expression here. Yeah. Now, if you look where my hand is pointing left, And then you keep following it to the other side where there is a blue at the end in the far corner. This is a journey from the left, which is the head, and that goes to the heart. This is where my research is, auditorium, research in healthcare. That is where the meditation center is. And the two are tied by this spine. Now it's very interesting. And I could go on hours about the spine, I don't want to. But the way I was taught, that the whole world, when they see a necklace, they see the beads. Our ancestors were searching for the unseen thread that connects the beads. That's my search. The beads everybody sees. So, this spine, and then we got into the function. They wanted 10 outpatient blocks, each one addressing one part of the human anatomy. You can see 10 squares there up on the left. Can you see them? Yeah? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those guys connected little, but they're all squares. Now, how did they happen this way? Normally you would have made a nice geometry out of this. Just around that time, I was watching a program where this doctor was speaking to a lady in her mid-20s and telling her that next to her, there was a diagram of the mother, the genetic one, saying by the time you are 50, you will develop the same breast cancer as your mother. This is what this diagram is showing. And I kept thinking and I said, oh God, how little we know about anything. So, we always work with little models, rough models. Sketches and models is our major language before we start hitting anything else. So we had these little blocks, 10 of them. So I came one morning, put them into a box and threw them. That's where they are built. Because the randomness and the things we don't understand, this was my way of expressing it. That don't claim to know everything, because you don't. So, that's how it happened. Very organic. So it's not this, somebody will say, why you put it like this? Why you put it like that? I'm just telling you, it was as simple as that. And then on the other side was a complete discipline of radiation therapy and so on, so forth, and intensive care and operation theaters. And I won't get into all that. That's a whole subject. It'll take a whole day. But yeah, please proceed. And that's how the entire geometry started to develop. Yeah? Go on. And that's how the structure started to develop. Now, on the right is the complete housing complex, which we designed completely using fly ash, because there is a huge amount of industry there, and fly ash is being generated. So through fly ash bricks, we developed the entire housing complex. You will see a few snatches. As I said, time is short. I'd rather run you by a smattering of things than getting into the details of one, Yeah. And that's the Google image. I think another 2 years, I think it should be done. But that's the Google image of the project. Yeah, move on, please. Now, here was, at the same time as Lupin, we did another research spark. But this was for a German company. Very interesting. Why I'm I've just picked these few projects because there's something interesting there. You know what the Germans are like. And some of them feel that the Bauhaus was the last word, in architecture. And the professor was a wonderful, the head of the institution, Dr. Figala, I still remember his name, was a fantastic guy. He was a person who understood art, he understood culture, sensitive man, as he was a great scientist. And therefore, we were told it was a competition, 5-6 architects, and in that, the brief was very clear. There's a very old colonial house at the entrance. It is to be removed, and then you design. And there were lots of old trees on the site. And I've already told you about the trees, so I won't get into that. So, when I presented, the first thing is, that's the house. Just go back. Yeah, go on. Go on, go on. Yeah. On the left is the house. And then that's where at the end, between those giant trees, we designed the R&D center. But when they saw this, they said, you don't know English. So I was wondering. We said, take the house out. So I said, can we finish with the R&D center? I can come back to this house because it's not interfering. You're just going past the house. You can't drive through it. There are trees there. So how does it matter it's there or it's not there? And it's a 150-year-old colonial bungalow. So anyway, to cut the story short, Dr. Figala supported me, and he ultimately lived for many years till he went back to Germany in the house, and he could walk to his R&D center exactly 2 minutes away through the trees. And we therefore then restored this house. So that's why this story, and a few images of the house and its restoration. Yeah. So this was added on, the verandas and so on and so forth. Yeah. Yeah, and this is interesting. Nice double height, huge space. And he had a dog, and he was married. And there were times when he said, I want to be by myself. So we were sharing a joke one day, and then therefore that's what I built for him. He says, my wife can't climb up there, so I'm good there. So that's where he would sit and do his thing. It's a wonderful little intervention in that space. Yeah. Yeah. So you can see there is, whilst there is architecture going on somewhere, but this ability to deal with the past, to deal with heritage sympathetically, they can coexist. Yeah. Now, the research center, again, quite Miesian in effect. It was simply steel, very lightweight steel, focusing on the trees. Yeah, just see the images. So we did this house in Rajasthan, built entirely in stone and lime. There's no concrete, there's no steel, nothing. And we've developed a team locally who works in stone. And so I'll just run you by, you can see some of the images, the influences, and then the images. Go on. That's the house. Simple plan with cavity walls. So we used 6-inch stone, 6-inch cavity, 6-inch stone, and ran all the services through the cavities. Yeah. This is Ahmedabad, and the one thing, we had designed a school here 4 years back for the Ahmedabad International School, a second campus they were doing. And then the rule came that they fixed a maximum top cap on the fees. So they aborted the project after the drawings had been done. So you can take a look at how this was conceptualized. This is the site and its origins, the 2 clumps of trees. Also working between the levels. So especially primary, the children could come at a grade and then go a few steps down, few steps up. The whole idea was to work it very much like your old pole architecture and your subterranean architecture also, a combination of all that. And then you can go on. And see how the idea develops. The higher school, the secondary, goes on top into the tubes, and the lower one is fragmented into the ground and first, which is kind of merged with the ground. My house, just briefly, on top of a hill overlooking Tungi fort and the river, the lake. That's the fort. You can just, I think you get a very good idea. I won't run you by too much of it, just quickly. It was shot by Edmund, the very famous photographer. Here on the weekends, every weekend. So thank you very much. There was a lot more, but another time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your really insightful session. We really didn't want to stop you, but it was great seeing your designs, how simple it was, how you created such magical spaces with light and shadow. Thank you for your time and this amazing session. So we move forward with a small questionnaire, And you can feel free to interact with him. And let me know if you have any queries. You can raise your hands. Anyone?
I don't have any question right now, but we are blessed to have you here. And there are lots of inspiration and energies, and talk about the discussion details that comes later on, but the intuitions that comes within from you. That's the great thing. We're glad to have you here. Thank you.